and shortly after this, Souza left for New York. So, was it his so-called black art, heart, or skin that was being castigated? Moreover, what inspired the blackness of the 1965 images? The art of darkness. While much has been said about Souza's black mode in the 1960s, few have linked his black paintings to the disposition of the British art world at the time. After all, 1960s Britain was a dark place for most painters. Perhaps Souza, like his contemporaries Francis Bacon and Graham Sutherland, was also caught up in depicting trails of post-war Britain. Both the Souzas in the Tate Gallery and the V&A Museum collections, Crucifixion and Black Nude, 1961, respectively, were painted in the lead up to Souza's 1966 exhibition. So, in this work, Souza's razor towards backlight Christ demonstrates that he was consistently eradicating bright hues from his palette. His early and later paintings were characterized by thick black lines that also reveled in color, acid yellows, harsh blues, bloody reds. But by the 1950s and early 60s, however, Souza's images were swamped by sinister shades. And this development did not happen in isolation. As I think Philip will show, both Sutherland and Bacon were employing blooming palettes, and Christian iconography. Black Christ viciously deformed poles to suggest moral decay. Souza's 1965 black pole. So this is a Sutherland. So Souza's black pole, with his bulky seat of form thrusting out from a sea of corrugated paint, sits in very good company. Perhaps, too, Souza's own circumstances as a man of colour and inverted commas instigated him to tune into an even gloomier facet of post-war Britain, which was discrimination, in which case we can see the black paintings as a culmination of Souza's interest in the politics of colour since the Notting Hill race riots in 1957. Souza's Negro and Mourning shows a suited blue black figure fabricated with rolling brushstrokes against a white backdrop. Souza's statement about the work demonstrates his sensitivity to the racial connotations of black. He says, I painted Negro and Mourning in London when the race riots flared. It is about the colour of skin. Of course, the black paintings could have been a purely formal experiment with colour. It has been pointed out that 1965 was one of Souza's most productive years. Along with the black paintings, he was also exploring how traditional Indian images could be incorporated into his art. In her catalogue essay for another series of black paintings entirely, i.e. those by the Americans Robert Rauschenberg, Ad Reinhardt, Mark Rothko, and Clyde Steller in the 1950s and 60s, curator Stephanie Rosenthal relays the abstract expressionist investigation of blackness, and she says, for the viewer too, these images represent a transition. Without being conscious of this fact, we sense that they will take us to the limits of the visible. And so you have Rauschenberg's untitled black painting, and it's really quite glossy. And then on the other extreme, there's the Mark Rothko with his sort of guilty kind of figures. In the next part, I'll sort of show you a very contemporary Idris Khan, which also like uses black. And all of these sort of seem to be concerned with sort of thresholds, the limits of the visible, and of course the mystical and almost religious connotations of blackness. So it's possible that Souza's black, and you can see with Souza as well, you have all these different surfaces in the work. So they're certainly receptive to the formal possibilities of blackness, its potential for creating disorientation and doubles. For instance, two painted lovers, standing couple and couple in the dark, share similar names but sport different tints. While one is defined with glistening coal black and pastel, the other is encased in the box's face, their chalk-like mass rising from a matte greyish background. For Souza's black art and experiment, exploring black's connection to debates about the sublime, i.e. to birth, death, and rebirth, a Kali-like conflation to be found in Hindu mythology and obviously the Bible, or with black painting's statement against oppression. There might have been both. Lastly, whatever motivated the black paintings, it is possible that they had to deal with the social politics of colour and their reception. The Guardian critic of the time, Tim Hilton, wrote about Irene's 1989 The Other Story, admittedly in less than flattering terms. And he to pose a telling question about the 1960s. He says, could it be that there was then more racism in the British art world, and that young black artists were being squeezed out at just the time when young working class artists from the British provinces were finding unprecedented public fortune? Even at the height of his fame as a British artist in the 1950s, the reviewers of Souza's exhibitions were always on the cusp of accusing him of being derivative. Why is it that Indian modernists are invariably castigated in this way? No one accused Picasso of plagiarizing African masks, or Henry Matisse of purloining elements from Islamic miniatures. They both were clearly influenced, a non-pejorative term. Souza writes in Words and Lines, if modern art is hybrid, what is the school of Paris? Indian artists who borrow from the school of Paris are home from home. So Indian modernism in Souza's hands achieves a homecoming. He says, this seems to dovetail with Arleen's contention as well, who says, when Afro-Asian artists arrived from different parts of the world in Europe, they were not carrying another culture, but different levels of the same culture that they had left behind. So this is a migration show again, and you've got Souza at the back there, which is very in front. Today's panel makes an attempt to tackle this dual issue of race and creativity, and how they might have joined together in Souza's black art in Britain. While Philip Vann will situate Souza within the context of European modernism in the 1960s, Gilane Tawadros will speak about Souza's black paintings in the context of post-colonialism.
You're in. Really? No. I don't really like the. What is it? Idris Khan.
Yeah. That's very kind. Well, that'd be great for you, Carly.
You invited me as well.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this celebration of Francis Newton Souza. He was born in Goa in 1924. His father died when he was 3 months old, and he moved with his mother to Bombay in 1928. As the critic Edwin Mullins wrote in his monograph on Souza in 1962, he was an Indian painter brought up a strict Roman Catholic under Portuguese colonial rule, later a member of the Communist Party, and now, 1961, living in London. He was inspired early on in Goa by both Portuguese and Indian elements, a mixture of high Brahmin Hindu and Portuguese Baroque culture, as well as Kunbi tribal folk culture. Later, as a man and artist, he reacted bitterly against the power-hungry hypocrisies of the Catholic clergy and the Catholic men who stood, he said, cocky in their suits and ties, agreeing with the priests, lusting for naked women inwardly, hypocrites. Yet much of his work is imbued with a sacred grandeur based in a religious iconography arising from his strict Catholic upbringing. Also from the stories of tortured saints that his grandmother used to tell him, and the beautiful ceremonies and interiors of Goan churches. Becoming a student at the Sir J.J. School of Art in Bombay in 1940, art was prescribed in purely Western academic terms, in the most narrow terms. As he said, he was then expected to admire images of blonde operatic Christs and flaxen-haired shy virgins. Inevitably, he was expelled in 1945 for his left-wing views. He sailed to London with his wife Maria in the summer of 1949, where he says he was astonished by the post-war grimness of London. Very different now. At the time, Souza painted Mr. Sebastian in 1955, which was painting here. He was a penurious, struggling artist, an outsider in an austerely grown city. The opulent colours, vibrant vegetation and wildlife of his childhood were retained in memory, were absent in reality. His image of the persecuted saint is grotesquely updated as he is seen as a man in white shirt, sober tie, suit and tie, with a as a kind of brutalist four-headed everyman. In 2006, the writer John Berger recalled Souza's presence as above all as that of the martyr. The confrontation within him between pain and voluptuousness, he wrote, between fury and calm, are comparable, I believe, to those often discovered in martyrdom. 1955 was a turning point for Souza. He started selling works to discerning collectors, and Stephen Spender published his autobiographical essay, Nirvana of a Maggot, in Encounter magazine. Souza's first exhibition at Victor Musgrave's Avant-Garde Gallery 1 in London in the same year was a huge success, critically and in terms of sales. The front and back covers of Souza's catalogue for a Gallery 1 show in 1962 show the artist in tie and corduroy jacket with a painted animalistic, perhaps screaming mouth collaged over his otherwise sober visage. The photo on the back cover is of the artist seen behind, a black arrow piercing his neck, so the patches of black ink are seen to bleed down his respectable jacket. In his catalogue notes to his 1961 show at Gallery 1, he set out his own outrageously personal, countercultural, artistic manifesto. He wrote, I started using more than 2 eyes, numerous eyes, and figures on my paintings and drawings of human figures. Why should I be sparse and parsimonious when not only this world, but worlds in space are open to me? I have everything to use at my disposal. I leave discretion, understatement, discrimination to the finicky and the lunatic fringe. Because he wasn't being discriminated. In any way, I have never counted the number of teeth I've drawn in grinning mouths. So what are the few extra eyes, fingers, etc.? His 1956 painting, The Student, is actually not disfigured with multitudinous eyes and fingers, etc., but is rather a robustly contoured, richly impasto portrait of a young but somehow ageless man. His dark, melancholically defeated countenance is transfigured by an interior greenish, yellow-hued glow. There is real compassion here for a man who seems subsumed by the murky authoritarianism of a rigid scholastic system, as Souza had felt himself very strongly at art school in Bombay. His 1957 painting of a frightened head has the glaring grimace and transfixed stare of one of Picasso's portrayed victims of war. The use of black paint for features and outline of the neck is in startling contrast to the delicately lyrical, rather pastoral lights of the background. In his monumental, serene, nude standing in front of Brocade, 1961, the use of black paint to evoke the contours, the essential scaffolding of the female form, which has the erotic presence of Indian temple sculptures, is very assured and telling. Black geometric outlines form the bold scaffolding of the Erdenscape in landscape with trees. Though this is a dark and minatory painting, almost sinister with its prickly arboreal calligraphy to the right for both trees and the artist's signature, a redemptive luminosity shines through, like light through thickly leaded medieval stained glass. In Souza's 1961 picture, Still Life with Fruit, the fruit and vessels take on a quite hallucinatorily sacred, even liturgical quality against the sombre backdrop, partly speckled and crisscrossed with black. This is the cover of the invitation to Souza's Black Art and Other Paintings exhibition held at the Grosvenor Gallery in 1966. You see him here in a suited figure of the artist in a central grid of the invitation. but to the left and right are 16 silver patches